What kind of evil, what kind of darkness could make God send fire from heaven to destroy not one, but two entire cities? This isn't just some old story. It's a warning, a serious message for us today. The cities of Sodom and Gomorrah used to be full of life. People lived in houses, shopped in markets, raised families. It looked just like any city today, but something terrible happened. Over time, the people's hearts became hard. They stopped caring about what was good. They started doing things that were so bad, so cruel, that even God couldn't let it go anymore. God is patient. He's kind. He gives people time to change, but Sodom and Gomorrah refused. So God sent two angels to visit the city and see what was really going on. Lot, a man who still followed God, invited the angels to stay in his home. He knew they were special, but what happened next was horrifying. That night, the men of Sodom surrounded Lot's house. They weren't there to say hello. They were there to hurt the guests. They demanded that Lot send the angels outside so they could abuse them. These men had lost all respect for others. They didn't care that the guests were holy. They didn't care that what they were doing was evil. They were filled with lust, yes, but it was more than that. It was about power. It was about control. They didn't care about love. They didn't care about kindness. They just wanted to do what they wanted, no matter who got hurt. Even worse, they wanted to attack the very people God had sent, and that's when a final decision was made. God had seen enough. The next morning, fire and burning sulfur fell from the sky. The cities were destroyed. Everything, homes, trees, animals, people, was gone. Only smoke was left, rising up from the ashes. But the question still haunts us. What made Sodom and Gomorrah so wicked that God had to destroy them completely? Were they just a few bad people, or was it something deeper? In this video, we're going to look at 5 major sins that caused the fall of these cities. And here's the scary part. These sins still exist in our world today. If you're ready to uncover the truth about Sodom and Gomorrah and learn what it means for us, type 777 in the comments. Let's start with the first sin. It's the one most people talk about, but it's deeper than most realize. Number 1, sexual sin and violence. In the book of Genesis, chapter 19, 2 angels come to Sodom. They look like regular men. Lot sees them and invites them into his home. He gives them food, water, and a place to rest. But that night, something terrible happens. The men of the city surround Lot's house. All of them, young and old, come together in a crowd. They start yelling. They demand that Lot send his guests outside. Why? Because they want to harm them in the worst way. Not just fight, not just steal, but something far more evil. They want to use them for their own pleasure. The Bible says the men wanted to know them. That word doesn't mean meat, it means something violent, something disgusting. This wasn't love, it wasn't passion, it was cruelty. These men didn't care that the visitors were special messengers from God. They didn't care that they were guests. They didn't care at all. They had turned something beautiful, something created by God, into something twisted. They had no respect for other people, no respect for purity, no respect for life. And God had seen enough. God designed sex to be special, something shared between a man and woman in love and trust. It was supposed to show unity, care, and commitment. But the people of Sodom had turned it into something dark, something harmful, something ugly. And sadly, we still see this today. All around us, society makes jokes about purity. Movies and music celebrate things that hurt others. The lines between right and wrong are getting blurry, and many people laugh at the idea of saving anything for marriage. But here's the truth. When people stop caring about what is sacred, when they treat others like objects, God takes notice. In Sodom, the people had stopped listening to God a long time ago. They didn't just sin, they celebrated it. They had no shame, no remorse. And when people reach that point, God acts. God's judgment wasn't sudden. He had waited. He had given them time. He had even let Abraham ask, "Will you save the city if there are just 10 good people?" And God said yes. But there weren't 10, not even close. So judgment came. And now we must ask ourselves, are we seeing the same thing happen today? Have we allowed sin to become normal? Have we forgotten the sacred things God gave us? This story isn't here to scare you, it's here to wake us up. It's not just about what the people of Sodom did. It's about what happens when we stop listening to God, when we think we can live however we want, when we ignore His voice. The people of Sodom lost their way, but we don't have to. Will you turn back before it's too late? Number 2, pride and arrogance. The second big sin that brought down Sodom was pride. Now, pride doesn't always look like someone showing off. Sometimes it's quiet, it hides deep inside, but it grows until it takes over. The prophet Ezekiel talked about Sodom hundreds of years after it was destroyed. He said something powerful. "This was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were proud. They had plenty to eat and lived in peace, but they didn't help the poor and needy." Ezekiel 16:49. Did you catch that? They were full, they were rich, life was easy, but their hearts were hard. They didn't care about anyone but themselves. They had everything, but lost what mattered most. When people have a lot, money, food, comfort, they can start to forget where it all came from. They think they earned it. They believe they don't need God anymore. They stop praying, stop thanking, stop caring. That's what happened in Sodom. They thought they were above others. They didn't help the poor. They ignored the suffering. They believed they were untouchable. But no one is beyond God's reach. The Bible is filled with stories about people who got too proud and fell hard. Babylon said, "No one can take me down." But they fell in one night. Egypt was powerful, but God humbled them with plagues. Even King Nebuchadnezzar, a king of kings, lost his mind for years until he finally said, "God is the true ruler." Pride makes us think we're the center of everything. It makes us forget that every good thing comes from God. And here's the truth. Pride comes before destruction, every time. The people of Sodom didn't just have stuff, they had too much. But instead of sharing, they kept it to themselves. Instead of helping, they ignored. Instead of being thankful, they grew proud. Have you ever had a moment where you forgot to say thank you, or thought you didn't need help? We all do sometimes. That's pride sneaking in. And when pride takes over, it becomes dangerous, because it closes our eyes to the truth, and it shuts our hearts to God. Think about today's world. We live in a time full of pride. People brag about their money, their fame, their looks, their success. We hear things like, "I don't need God. I built this life myself. Why should I care about anyone else?" Sound familiar? Pride isn't just about acting like a big shot. It's about turning your heart away from the one who gave you everything. It's forgetting that we're not in control. God is. The people of Sodom thought nothing bad could ever happen to them, but they were wrong. And when they fell, it was fast and total. That's what pride does. The worst part? They didn't even see it coming. They were so wrapped up in their own greatness, they didn't realize how lost they were. They were full on the outside, but empty inside. And that's the danger of pride. It fills your life with things, but leaves your soul starving. The Bible says in James 4:6, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. God isn't looking for perfect people. He's looking for humble hearts, people who know they need him, people who are willing to admit when they're wrong. Let's stop and think. Do we thank God for the things we have? Do we help people when we see they're hurting? Do we believe we're better than others? It's easy to let pride sneak into our hearts. It happens slowly. But if we're not careful, we can become just like Sodom, rich in things, but poor in spirit. God's message is clear. Don't be like them. Pride destroyed Sodom, and it can destroy us too if we don't stay close to God. But the good news? There's still time to change. There's still time to humble our hearts. This story isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to open your eyes. It's a wake-up call. God wants us to live differently. He wants us to love humbly, to serve quietly, to remember that everything we have comes from Him. Don't wait until it's too late. Pride brought Sodom to ruin, but humility brings us back to God. Number 3, lack of kindness to strangers. In ancient times, hospitality was a big deal. When someone visited your city or your home, it was expected, no, it was honored, that you would welcome them, give them water, food, a place to rest. It wasn't just about being nice. It was a sacred rule, a way of showing love and respect, especially to people who were far from home. But in Sodom, things were different. The people there didn't care about visitors. They didn't care about kindness. They didn't care about God's way. When the 2 angels came to visit Sodom, disguised as ordinary men, Lot was the only one who treated them right. He opened his home, gave them food, and protected them. But then, the men of the city surrounded his home. They didn't want to shake hands. They wanted to attack the guests. Instead of welcoming the strangers, they tried to hurt them. This wasn't just bad manners. It wasn't just a lack of respect. It was evil. The Bible tells us in Hebrews 13:2, "Don't forget to show hospitality to strangers. Some people have shown kindness to angels without even knowing it." That verse is probably talking about this very moment, when Lot welcomed 2 angels. God cares deeply about how we treat people, especially those who are vulnerable, travelers, the poor, the lonely. When we welcome them, we show the heart of God. When we reject them, we're rejecting Him. In Sodom, the people failed the test, badly. They didn't just ignore the angels. They tried to harm them. That showed how far their hearts had fallen. Today, we might not think much about hospitality. We're used to keeping to ourselves. But God still calls us to open our hearts, to notice people, to care. The way we treat others, especially people we don't know, says a lot about who we are inside. Are we kind? Are we welcoming? Or have we let fear, busyness, or selfishness close our doors? Imagine someone knocked on your door needing help. Would you open it? Would you offer food, water, comfort? Or would you look away, thinking it's not your problem? The people of Sodom weren't just rude. They were cruel, and God noticed. Their hearts had turned cold. And when kindness disappears from a city, judgment isn't far behind. Jesus said in Matthew 25:35, "I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in." When we help others, we're helping Jesus. When we ignore them, we're turning our backs on Him. That's serious. That's why the sin of Sodom wasn't just about what they did. It was about who they had become. People who no longer cared. People who had no love left in their hearts. People who had shut God out completely. Lot tried to stop the mob. He even offered to protect the guests with his life. But the people didn't listen. They laughed. They threatened. They pressed harder. They had no idea they were trying to attack angels. They had no clue that God was watching. but he was, and his judgment was coming. Let's ask some big questions. Are we welcoming to strangers? Do we care about others' needs? Or are we too focused on ourselves? Hospitality isn't just about opening our homes. It's about opening our hearts. It's saying, you matter. It's saying, I see you. It's saying, you're not alone. In a world that can be cold, kindness is powerful. It shines like a light in the darkness. These small acts matter. They show love. They reflect God. The people of Sodom didn't just miss this, they threw it away. They destroyed it, and in doing so, they destroyed themselves. Sodom's downfall wasn't just because of one big sin. It was a pattern, pride, sexual sin, and now a total lack of love for others. They had every chance to change. God gave them time, but they kept going down the wrong path. And one night, it ended. This part of the story is a clear warning, not just to ancient cities, but to us. Because if we let our hearts grow cold, if we stop showing kindness, if we stop caring about strangers, we may one day find ourselves just like Sodom, empty, broken, and far from God. Kindness isn't just nice. It's holy, and it might just save a soul, including yours. Number 4, hurting the poor and ignoring the needy. The fourth big sin of Sodom was how they treated the poor and needy. And by treated, we mean they didn't. They ignored them. They walked past them. They chose not to care. And that deeply hurt the heart of God. Let's go back to the verse from Ezekiel 16:49. This was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were proud, had plenty of food, and lived in peace. But they did not help the poor and needy. They had everything, but they gave nothing. That was a big part of why Sodom was destroyed. God has always cared for the poor. From the very beginning, the Bible tells us to feed the hungry, protect widows and orphans, speak up for the weak, help those who can't help themselves. This isn't a small thing to God. It's a huge part of who He is. When we take care of people in need, we're acting like God. When we don't, we're turning our backs on Him. The people of Sodom had more than enough. They had homes, food, land, clothes. But instead of helping others, they hoarded everything. They chose comfort over compassion. They chose greed over generosity. And that choice led to their destruction. Can you imagine that? God watching people suffer, while others have more than they need, and no one helps. That broke His heart. This isn't just a story about ancient cities. It's about us. Ask yourself, do I help people when I see them struggling? Do I give when I have more than enough? Or do I look away and think, it's not my problem? We live in a world today where millions of people are hurting. Some are homeless, some are hungry, some are just waiting for someone to care. And too often people just scroll past, drive past, ignore it. That's what Sodom did, and God judged them for it. The Bible says in Proverbs 14:31, whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their Maker, but whoever is kind to the needy honors God. Think about that. If you're unkind to the poor, it's like you're being unkind to God. That's how close He feels to them. When you help someone in need, you're honoring Him. Helping others isn't just about charity, it's a test of our hearts. It shows whether we care about what God cares about. God's people are supposed to share what they have, stand up for the weak, love those who are hurting. But Sodom failed that test, big time. These small actions, they matter more than we think. To God, they're powerful. To the world, they're rare. If we keep turning our backs on the poor, if we keep ignoring the cries of the hurting, we may find ourselves walking the same path Sodom did. And that path leads to judgment, not because God is cruel, but because God is just. He gave them time. He gave them chances. They just didn't care. This isn't about guilt. It's about waking up. It's about realizing that how we treat others, especially the weakest, shows what kind of people we are. Sodom failed, but we don't have to. You don't need to be rich to make a difference. You just need to be willing. A kind word, a hot meal, a moment to listen, $1 given with love. That's all it takes to reflect the heart of God. We are not meant to live selfish lives. We are meant to love, to care, to help. And every time we do, we move farther away from the spirit of Sodom and closer to the spirit of God. When you care for the poor, you honor the one who made you. Number 5, rebellion and refusing to change. The final and maybe worst sin of Sodom was this: they didn't want to change. No matter how many warnings they got, no matter how many chances God gave them, they refused to listen. God didn't destroy Sodom right away. He gave them time. He gave them messengers. He gave them chances. And still, they didn't care. Even Abraham, God's friend, tried to help. He prayed and begged God to spare the city. "What if there are just 10 good people there?" Abraham asked. And God said, "If there are 10, I will not destroy it." But there weren't even 10, not even close. That shows just how far the city had fallen. When the angels came to Sodom, they warned Lot, "Get out, take your family. This place is about to be destroyed." So Lot ran to his sons-in-law. He begged them to come. But what did they do? They laughed. They thought he was joking. They didn't believe him. Even with disaster coming, they refused to listen. That's what rebellion looks like. It's not just doing bad things. It's knowing the truth and still turning away. This part of the story is hard, not because God is mean or angry, but because he's heartbroken. He gave them time. He gave them warnings. He gave them chances to change, but they wouldn't. They liked their sin more than they wanted to be saved. And so, judgment came. God told them, "Run. Don't look back." Why? Because Sodom was over. It was time to leave the old life behind, but someone couldn't. As they ran, Lot's wife made a mistake. She looked back, not just a quick glance. She longed for what she left behind. Maybe she missed the life. Maybe she missed the people. Maybe part of her still wanted Sodom. And in that moment, she turned into a pillar of salt. Gone. Just like that. Why did that happen? Because she couldn't let go. Even when God saved her, she kept her heart tied to the past. Think about it. Has God tried to save you from something, but you keep going back? Are you holding on to a sin even though it's hurting you? Are you refusing to change even when you know you should? That's what Sodom did. That's what Lot's wife did. And it led to destruction. God is patient. He waits. He gives warnings. But there comes a point when the time runs out. That's what happened in Sodom. They had their chance. They ignored it, and then it was too late. Even after escaping, things didn't go well. Lot was saved, yes, but he was scared. He didn't go back to a full life. He didn't rebuild. He hid in a cave with his daughters. And there more trouble came. Out of fear and confusion, his daughters made a terrible choice. They got their father drunk. They slept with him. They thought this was the only way to keep their family line alive. They didn't trust God's plan. They took matters into their own hands. And from that came 2 new nations, the Moabites and the Ammonites, future enemies of Israel. Even though they escaped Sodom, Sodom hadn't fully left them. Sometimes we think, I left the bad stuff behind. I'm good now. But it's not just about leaving physically, it's about changing your heart. Lot's family left the city, but their thinking didn't change. Their fears didn't go away. Their sin still followed them, and it led to more pain. If God is calling you out of something, out of sin, out of fear, out of rebellion, don't look back, don't hold on. Don't keep one foot in the old life, because that old life can still pull you down. There's hope, but only if we choose it. Only if we say yes to God. Rebellion isn't just breaking the rules. It's knowing what's right and still choosing wrong. God will give you chances, but He won't force you to change. That choice is yours. Don't look back. Don't hold on to what God is calling you to leave behind. Walk forward. He's waiting for you. The final warning and the choice you must make. This story isn't just about fire from the sky. It's not just about a city that vanished. It's about a warning, a message that's meant for you and me. Because the truth is, the same sins that destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, they're still here, right now, all around us. Let's look back at what caused their fall. Sexual sin and violence. They twisted something pure into something dark. Pride. They thought they didn't need God. No kindness. They didn't welcome strangers. Ignoring the poor. They turned away from people who needed help. Refusing to change. Even when warned, they didn't listen. And these things, they're still happening today. Our world hasn't changed much, has it? And that means we need to change. Even though the world changes, God does not. He's still loving, still patient, still just, and still waiting for people to come back to Him. The Bible says in 2 Peter 3:9, "The Lord is patient with you, not wanting anyone to be destroyed, but everyone to come to repentance." God gave Sodom many chances. They just didn't take them. But you still can. Yes, judgment is real, but so is mercy. God doesn't want to destroy anyone. He wants to rescue you. Sodom had warnings. They had chances. They had time. But they wasted it. And one day, the chance to change was gone. Let's be honest. How many times has God called you? How many times have you felt that tug in your heart? How many chances have you had to turn away from the things that pull you down? Don't wait until it's too late. God is giving you a choice, just like He gave Sodom, just like He gave Lot. Lot was rescued. He didn't do everything right. He made mistakes, but he said yes to God when it mattered, and God saved him. You can say yes too. You can leave the old life behind. You can step into something better, but you must be willing to let go, willing to change, willing to trust God even when it's hard. Remember them? They survived, but their hearts were still filled with fear and confusion. They didn't trust that God had a plan, so they tried to take control and ended up doing something terrible. Even when we escape sin, we still need healing. We need God to change us from the inside. That's what real salvation is, not just surviving, but becoming new. God's not just trying to save us from fire. He's trying to bring light into our hearts. He wants us to let go of sin, heal from the past, live with love, be filled with His Spirit. Right now you have a choice, to look back or to move forward, to stay in rebellion or to surrender, to live like Sodom or to walk with God. What will you choose? Take a moment. Ask yourself, is there sin I've been holding on to? Have I ignored the people who need help? Have I let pride take over? Am I still looking back at what God wants me to leave behind? If the answer is yes to any of these, there's still hope, because you're still here. And that means it's not too late. God can make something new out of ashes. Even if you've made mistakes, even if you've fallen far, He can restore you. If this story opened your eyes, if it stirred something in your heart, don't walk away and forget it. Let it change you. Let it move you to action. Let it push you closer to God. The fire fell, but mercy still stands. So, what will you do next? Watch the next video where we continue this journey of discovery. It's called Heaven is Not What You Think, and trust me, it will open your eyes in ways you never expected.